Yes, good morning. Chairman Barrasso, Ranking Member Carper, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide my perspective on disease challenges to wildlife management and conservation. Today I will highlight some of the lessons I've learned over the last 25 years dealing with wildlife diseases, and many of them have been mentioned already. Chronic wasting disease. It's a prion disease that affects the cervid or deer family. Although related to bovine spongiform encephalopathy, it is a distinct disease. Prions are infectious proteins that convert normal proteins found in the brain into their abnormal prion form. Over time, microscopic holes appear and changes in behavior and body condition develop and ultimately result in death. CWD can be transmitted to other cervids directly via saliva, urine, or feces, or indirectly when the environment gets contaminated. Since this disease was first recognized 50 years ago, it has been reported in 24 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and several other countries. Chronic wasting disease has caused declines in some populations in Colorado and Wyoming, but not in others. There is no evidence that CWD is a human health threat or that it can be naturally transmitted to livestock, but concerns remain. The public remains confused and concerned about chronic wasting disease. There's a lack of understanding about the potential impacts of the disease. There's a feeling among some interest groups that regulations are overly stringent. The fact that different states manage CWD differently also adds to this confusion. Finally, there's a multitude of different messages concerning CWD's impact to humans and animals. Bighorn sheep respiratory disease complex, also previously mentioned by the chairman. Bighorn sheep are extremely susceptible to respiratory pathogens. Huge outbreaks have occurred, in some cases eradicating entire populations. In a typical scenario, there's a die-off that affects large proportions of the population, and then subsequently that population fails to rebound because young animals fail to get recruited into the population, even though their lambs are being born. While clearly not absolute, there's an association with domestic sheep having close contact with bighorns prior to an outbreak. This has caused a great deal of contention between domestic sheep producers and wildlife management and enthusiasts. Wyoming resolved this conflict via the Wyoming statewide Bighorn Domestic Sheep Interaction Working Group, which included representatives of state and federal wildlife and livestock agencies, producers groups, wildlife non-government organizations, and enthusiasts. By working from a set of common ground rules and common goals, the group became very effective. White nose syndrome of bats is a fungus that was first detected in New York, and the disease remains most common in Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. It kills by invading the skin of hibernating bats and leads to emaciation, which causes the bats to awake from hibernation early in the year and subsequently succumb to starvation, cold exposure, or both. The fungus for white nose grows well in cold, dark environments, the type of environments that bats choose to hibernate. As mentioned, it's wiped out over 90% of the common little brown bat colonies in the Northeast and has led to the northern long-eared bat becoming listed as a threatened species, and there's concerns that it may threaten many other species with extinction. And as also mentioned, bats are important economically for agriculture, and the value that they may contribute, it ranges from $22 to $53 billion per year to agriculture across the U.S. Chytrid fungus. Fungus of amphibian is the most important disease to wildlife populations. Estimates are that chytrid may have already led to the extinction of 100 species and may threaten populations of 200 more. When susceptible species are infected, chytrid causes reddening and thickening of the skin, thus preventing its normal function, which also disrupts water and electrolyte balance, leading to death. The chytrid fungus is sensitive. It prefers moist environments and will not survive below freezing or above 29 degrees Celsius. Anthrax, the one disease that has not been previously mentioned, is caused by a bacteria and can be a major source of livestock and wildlife mortality worldwide. Animals typically ingest anthrax spores on vegetation or soil. In the bloodstream, these replicate as vegetative cells and release toxins that rapidly kill the animal. When the tissues or blood from the carcass is exposed to air, the vegetative cells return to the spore form, and these spores are extremely hardy. They can literally survive for hundreds of years. Endemic areas in the U.S., which include parts of Texas, Montana, and the Dakotas, normally only experience an occasional death, but occasionally, when conditions are right, huge outbreaks can occur. Such was the case in Texas this past summer. It's estimated that 10,000 animals may have died of anthrax with an economic impact of over $15 million. There is a safe and effective vaccine available to livestock. However, it is impractical to capture and restrain thousands of wild animals every year to vaccinate them. This is why researchers at Texas A&M University are working on an oral vaccine that can be fed to wildlife. In conclusion, I'd like to state how important it is that funding be made available to address wildlife diseases. I'm particularly concerned with the lack of federal funds available for research aimed at real-world management dilemmas. And with that, I thank you for inviting me here today.
Well,